The dumbbell is one of the most popular exercise tools today, and one of the oldest in the West, used by famous practitioners from Benjamin Franklin to General Custer to Frederick Douglass. However, the origins of the dumbbell are shrouded in mystery, and its manner of use has changed greatly over time. So much, in fact, that its practice today now little resembles that of the past. The use of hand weights in the West for the purpose of physical exercise goes back at least as early as ancient Greece, when such weights were made of stone and known as halteres or alteras, and were often swung in conjunction with leaping. Other shapes of hand weights also existed, fashioned from lead or iron. Some artwork from the period, such as this fresco from OSTIA, Antiquia near Rome, and this mural in Sicily, show gymnasts using hand weights appearing quite similar in form to modern dumbbells. Be that as it may, there is currently no evidence to suggest any direct connection or lineage between these ancient hand weights and modern dumbbells, although the former may have inspired the birth of the latter. During the Renaissance, a number of European authors, such as Girolamo Mercuriali in his De Arte Gymnastica, wrote about the use of halteres, representing them in artwork as concave cylinders, and recommending them for physical exercise, though it is uncertain how widespread or continuous any revival or practice may have been. The true progenitor of modern dumbbells arose during the late 1600s in England, which is also when the first use of the term dumbbell is recorded, though it meant something different at the time. It happened like this. During the period, church bell ringing was considered a valuable and difficult skill, and the ringers had to keep in constant practice. However, to practice on actual bells would disturb and confuse townspeople for miles around. They therefore devised machines on which they could silently practice, which they termed dumbbells, dumb in the sense of mute or silent. Soon, individuals also began using these machines for indoor physical exercise, referring to the practice as, quote, pulling or ringing the dumbbells. In 1711, the famous essayist Joseph Addison wrote of this machine, quote, I exercise myself an hour every morning upon a dumbbell that is placed in a corner of my room, and pleases me the more because it does everything I require of it in the most profound silence. My landlady and her daughters are so well acquainted with my hours of exercise that they never come into my room to disturb me while I am ringing. At the same time, people also began swinging small hand weights made of lead and fitted for one's grasp for exercise. This became known as, quote, swinging the leads, and was said to exercise the muscles of the upper body, expand the lungs, open the chest, promote perspiration, strengthen the pulse, and aid the powers of digestion. Of these, the Scottish judge and metaphysical author James Burnett, Lord MONBODDO, wrote, quote, I would advise every man who takes a bath to walk naked for some time in his room, with the windows open, and to practice some exercise such as I use, by swinging leads, and by that means to make some amends for the want of a practice which I am persuaded contributed very much to the health and strength of the Greeks and Romans. In 1738, it was noted in England that these leads were, quote, a thing much used in our universities. Around the middle of the century, these lead hand weights suddenly became known as dumbbells. The reason as to why the terminology changed is a mystery. It may be that the lead weights resembled the bars on the original dumbbell machine, or, as related in another account, because the clappers from church bells were taken out and swung for exercise. Whatever the case, the name dumbbell now became permanently associated with the hand weights rather than with the machine. These weights took on different shapes and sizes, some like bullets, others like rolling pins, and still others with spherical ends on either side. They were often covered in cloth or leather, and typically weighed a half a pound to several pounds, although there are reports of heavier ones. These dumbbells were especially valued, as, unlike with most exercises of the period, these could be practiced both indoors and outdoors, and were highly portable. These light dumbbells were typically swung rather than pushed, lifted, or raised. In fact, when British visitors to India first observed the swinging of Indian clubs by indigenous athletes, they remarked upon the extreme similarity between club swinging and the practice of English dumbbell swinging. As the American founding father and early exercise enthusiast Benjamin Franklin wrote from London in 1772, quote, "The dumbbell is another exercise of the latter compendious kind. By the use of it, I have in 40 swings quickened my pulse from 60 to 100 beats in a minute by a second watch. And again in 1786, quote, I live temperately, drink no wine, and use daily the exercise of the dumbbell. Another practitioner was American President Thomas Jefferson, whose crude lead dumbbells you see here. After dislocating his wrist in Paris in 1786, Jefferson used these to strengthen and heal his arm, while combined with a red woolen cushion and leather strap with brass button. The specimen you see here is possibly 18th century, but more likely from the early 19th century, when many such dumbbells were advertised for sale. Its misshapen iron core is surrounded by twill padding, likely to prevent injury while swinging at high speed, and covered in hand-stitched leather. As the 19th century progressed, dumbbells evolved to become even lighter, made of iron and then of wood, used by both men, women, and children. Some of these so-called fancy models were especially ornate, fashioned from multiple types and colors of wood. Hybrid models also existed, wherein iron bells were connected by a wood handle, said to be more comfortable for the hand. Some dumbbells were shaped like tin cans, some like telephone receivers, and still others like protractors, possibly inspired by shapes from the classical world. The ends of dumbbells could be cylindrical, angular, or globular. In Germany, where they were used extensively by the Turner physical culture movement, sometimes the dumbbells were affixed to the end of a stick or bar to simulate what we in modern times would think of as a barbell. The lightness of these dumbbells meant that they could be swung in a very fast and agile manner, often while elevated on one's toes and involving whole-body motion, cultivating not only strength and cardiovascular health, but also mobile flexibility, dexterity, suppleness, balance, and neuromuscular control. In schools and gymnasiums, they were often swung in large classes and drills, accompanied by music. This perfectly synchronized group activity, in addition to the physical benefits, would help develop rhythm, deep breathing, and mental focus, among other attributes. In Europe and America, a wide variety of different dumbbell exercises and techniques evolved. Practitioners used a variety of grips, including two-handed grips with a single dumbbell, often for flexibility, grips which used two dumbbells in the same hand, requiring greater finger strength, delicate finger grips like the one shown here, and other grips which grasped the spherical end. They were sometimes used on end to balance oneself above the floor, or even balanced on one's feet. There were also partner drills using both one and two dumbbells together. Sometimes in these exercises, the dumbbells were forcibly clashed or struck together, often in unison, or in partner drills. For this reason, wood dumbbells evolved to become less aesthetic and ornate, and more sturdy to resist the shock of these exercises. Later in the century, so-called musical dumbbells became popular. These dumbbells would ring when crisply thrown out in a particular way, thus forcing the pupils to be perfect and correct in their technique. John Harvey Kellogg, a physical culturalist and the famous inventor of American breakfast cereal, also invented a special model of mechanical vibrating dumbbell, which he claimed would work the muscles of the user more strenuously, for use at his Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan. Perhaps the most sensational invention of the period, however, was the electric dumbbell, sometimes called the, quote, magneto-electric dumbbell. These devices would send an electrical current of any desired strength through the practitioner's body, essentially transforming them into a human circuit, which was thought to, quote, cleanse the blood and bestow extra energy, allowing the user to exercise for longer periods. Typically made of wood or India rubber on the exterior, these dumbbells contained an interior motor which connected to a wearable generator or mercury battery pack. They became quite popular, as between the years 1883 and 1926, 10 patents for different electric dumbbells were registered in Britain and North America. Yet another model was invented in the lab, with which, when two dumbbells were struck together, they would produce a shower of sparks. As the century progressed, iron dumbbells came back into fashion, after having originally given way to wood. One famous practitioner was General George Armstrong Custer, who had this dumbbell hand-forged for him while stationed in Kansas. Yet another was the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who, as his granddaughter recounted, exercised with these 12-pound iron dumbbells every morning, swinging them, quote, both alternately, then both at the same time, over, behind, and in front. Boxers like Aaron Molyneux Hewlett had been using dumbbells since the late 18th century, developing particular exercises, such as what was known as, quote, throwing out the dumbbells. Later, shadowboxing with very light dumbbells became an important pugilistic exercise, done by the famous Jack Johnson, as well as Jim Jeffries. The 1915 Charlie Chaplin film The Champion also shows such exercises being performed in the background. Throughout the 19th century, the use of heavy dumbbells had always been a highly specialized activity, done by strongmen and advanced gymnasts, and relegated to the very back of exercise treatises. However, around the turn of the century, as strongmen became more widely admired, the mainstream populace became interested in bodybuilding, and works on heavy dumbbell use by authors such as Arthur Saxon and George Hackenschmidt became increasingly popular. Even then, however, these early 20th century practitioners were still guided by an old-school approach that involved swinging and whole-body movement, rarely exerting to muscle failure. It was not until later in the century, when the modern bodybuilding movement attained vast popularity, that dumbbell exercises in the West came to focus purely on muscle isolation and resistance exercises, and so-called maxing out to muscle failure, an approach which would be very foreign indeed to the dumbbell practitioners of old. Interestingly, today, in 21st century India, remnants of the old, light dumbbell exercises have survived, a relic of the former British colonial presence in the country. Join us next time as we demonstrate some of the more unusual dumbbell exercises from history, which haven't been seen or practiced in more than a century.